Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I've put together a list of the top 5 tips and tricks that you need to get better at Age of Empires 2 and to slowly improve and become a better player. So let's go ahead and dive right in and start off at number 5. At number 5, we've got the patrol or attack move everywhere tip. This is probably the best tip that you can get for fighting in Age of Empires. Patrol and attack move have very similar yet a little bit different functions, but they both serve the same purpose when it comes to taking fights. Patrol basically means that a unit will go back and forth between two areas, one where you start and the other where you put the patrol command to go. So they're just going to walk or run back and forth between those 2 points. But if they encounter any army from the opponent, you will actually be able to engage and start fighting them right away, even if you're not looking. Attack move does the same thing, except that they won't go back and forth between 2 areas. They're just going to walk towards 1 area. So it's a bit more practical in that sense. If you had to pick between one, I would say attack move is probably slightly easier and more beginner friendly, but patrol lets you do a little bit more with that one hotkey. However, I personally use both and I have hotkeys for both, and I think that gives you the most flexibility and the best function. It's a very easy thing to learn, and by mastering this technique, you're able to go ahead and run across any portion of the map without even looking and know that your opponent will not be able to surprise you. If your opponent army will run into yours, your army will engage it right away, and so it's a very safe way to walk around the map, not having to babysit each and every one of your units. And let's face it, there's 200 population to take care of. Your economy usually takes precedence in the early game, and so keeping track of your army can be very difficult. Patrol and attack move helps you take risks, be out on the map and attack and be offensive with your military without the risk of all of them dying without you paying attention and you just running into an enemy army. That would suck. Moving on to number 4, we've probably got the best and most important tip you can ever hear, literally ever, because this tip applies to every single player from very beginner to expert to top player to rank 1. Literally everybody needs to know and implement this very basic concept called spending your resources. I cannot stress this enough. Everything in Age of Empires is an investment, be it military on the map, which is a short-term investment. It's an investment that you can go into. That unit or those military units will go ahead and attack your opponent and try to get some value. If they don't, they get weaker over time unless you upgrade them, so it's a short-term investment. Other investments like economy upgrades or making villagers are more long-term investments. By putting in a little bit of money or a little bit of resources into an upgrade like double bid axe, it makes you gather resources faster, increasing your res collected per minute, allowing you to get that payback in a few minutes. And then once you get that payback, everything afterwards is purely profit for the rest of the game. So spending your resources is just the best way to use them instead of just keeping them in the stockpile where they're not generating more income. If you keep all of your resources in the stockpile, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to have less army on the field, so you can't contest important resources like golds and stones. You might start losing villagers because your opponent has more military than you on the field. You're not going to have as much villagers or as many economy upgrades, which means that your income per minute is lower than your opponent. So even though you might have more total resources currently, he will quickly outscale you and be able to dominate you in the later stages of the game because he has more villagers, more military, and more income per minute, which is way more valuable than having a little bit in your stockpile. Think about this very easy trade in real life. I give you $1,000. You can either hang on to those $1,000 for 10 years, or you can invest them in some kind of trade, and in 10 years, you'll have 10,000 gold. It's a very simple concept to understand, and it applies to everything in our daily lives, and it pretty much applies to everything in Age of Empires 2. Spending your resources should be viewed as an investment, and you almost always want to invest every single bit of resource into something. Now, I will put a little caveat here, a little disclaimer. Sometimes you do want to hold on to some resource, like for example, saving a little bit of gold in late game because gold is precious and will run out. In that kind of situation where scarcity plays a role, then hanging onto your resource can be a good strategic option. However, in the majority of Age of Empires 2 games, spending your resources will be an absolute key concept to maintain and to stick to, and that will be the best way to play the game. Moving on to number 3, I've got a very practical tip for all of you movie and TV show enjoyers. And let's face it, we all love a good Age of Empires 2 battle, but in this tip, I have to say, don't watch fights. Now, what I mean by this is not to send in your resources as you close your eyes and send them in random directions and take any fight possible without even thinking about it. You want to actually take strategic fights. You want to position your army well, patrol them in, micro a little bit if you have to. But once the units are fighting, if it's a big battle 40 on 40, and there's not really much to do when you're watching. You're just kind of watching to see what happens. In that brief 5 to 15 seconds that the fight is taking place, instead of watching to see what happens, start going back to your base, create this habit, go back to your base, fix all of your idle villagers, make more army and make more villagers, and then quickly tab back to the fight to see the outcome. In that middle area where the fight started, you took the good fight and the units started fighting, you have a 15-second window that watching the fight does nothing. You don't want to actively like micro each unit. It's a big battle. You don't need to individually, micro every single unit, and usually when you're watching, you're not really touching your units anyways, you're just kind of enjoying, and that's valuable time you could spend doing other things. So when it comes to playing faster in Age of Empires, this is one of the tips that I personally use to get an advantage over my opponent. Sure, my opponent probably had more fun enjoying the fight, but I'm gonna have more fun in the next fight because I'm gonna have more units, and maybe, just maybe, I'll watch that one and enjoy as I win the game. Don't watch fights unless it's a game-winning fight and you want to enjoy the final moments before you take your plus 16 ELO, or in my case on my road to 3k, my plus 1 ELO that I cherish so dearly. Moving on to number 2, we've got a bit more of an advanced tip, but something that you definitely want to invest the time into and learn, especially if you are a beginner player, and that is to use formations and stances. These, I can't stress how important they are crucial to understanding how military units will move, how they will, behave when you're not watching, etc. Formations help you keep your units tighter together. They help you split and dodge enemy projectiles, like the cool split micro to dodge mangonels, and you also have other functions like the stand ground stance, which keeps your units standing still instead of going on the aggressive when you're not paying attention, when you don't give them the command. This gives you extra control of your military and doesn't enable them to do weird things that you didn't authorize in the first place, which is what they normally do when they're on aggressive stance, which is the default. Now, obviously, I don't have time to get into each formation and each stance in this video, but my general advice is to use formations and stances in pretty much all aspects of the game, and I'd even go as far as to say that you should get a hotkey on most of the formations and stances, and that's going to help you, switch between stances depending on the situation in a very quick and efficient manner. Moving your mouse to the bottom left corner and clicking each formation and stance is not effective, so getting some hotkeys for these and learning what they do and then switching between them is a really good way to improve your micro and improve your unit control. And a very classic example is just switching from the line formation to the split formation and then back to the line formation to do, as we mentioned earlier, a very basic split micro and dodge enemy siege. Before I talk about number 1, I've got an honorable mention here, which is a nice little tip that you guys might not know. So I want to squeeze it in here because there's at least one person watching this. And if you are that person, leave a comment in the comment section. There's at least one person that doesn't know this. And I do coaching quite a bit. And you'd be surprised by how many people just don't know this because it's not a really intuitive thing to think about to have in the game. So basically, in this honorable mention, I'm going to go ahead and explain that all resource drop sites and town centers and farms will actually take the res out of your villagers' hands and into the stockpile when you build them. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have 10 wood and I'm chopping wood with a villager. Instead of sending him to the lumber camp and dropping off that wood and then going over to go ahead and build a mining camp and take some gold, I can just go directly to the mining camp, go to the gold, build the mining camp, don't touch the gold yet, build the mining camp, and that 10 wood, after he's done building the mining camp, will go to the stockpile. So you save that additional trip of having to drop it off first and then going to build the mining camp. Furthermore, if you want to make a house or make a military production building and you have that 10 wood, you can do that and you just won't lose the 10 wood. It won't go to your stockpile, but you won't lose it. So you could just take a village off wood, build something, and then go right back to chopping wood. And there's nothing wrong with that. So understanding these two concepts, that your resources that your villagers are collecting, they're not going to disappear unless you switch them from one resource and then start mining gold, then it will disappear. But if you make buildings, it doesn't disappear. And in some cases, it just stays in the village's hands. And in the cases where you make a resource drop off site, like a mining camp, lumber camp, etc., or a TC, or even a farm, it's going to take the res from the villager and go to the stockpile. The most practical usage of this is to use my tip and send your villagers in feudal age from your TC, put the gather point on straggler, let them chop wood. Then when you go to make a farm, you don't have to drop off that wood from the straggler. You just take the straggler bill and you just drop a farm. The wood will go from the villager's hands straight into the stockpile and you'll make a farm. Super efficient way to play the feudal age, and definitely good to know this tip. Moving on to number 1, the probably best tip you can ever hear, especially as a beginner in Age of Empires, is to add more production buildings. Guys, the main problem with newer players or beginners is that they have too much resources, too much res, and too little pop, too little production. And getting extra military production buildings on the field is a very logical step that you should do as every game goes on. Think of it logically. We start the game and we can afford 1 stable in feudal age and make some scouts. As we go to castle age, we maybe are able to afford 2 stables because we have extra villagers. After we make 3 TC boom and we go from 30 or 40 vills to 100 vills, how many stables can we afford? The average player will still be on 2 stables. That is just how the newer player operates, because he's been so focused on booming, he won't think to add more production. And I'm here to break that bad habit and tell you that if you can afford 2 stables at 40 vills, you can at least afford 5 stables at 100 vills. And you should be at least on 5 stable night production, if not more, as you have projections of more villagers to come. And you should get more army in the field to gain more and more advantage. That comes back to that 4th tip of spending your resources. Instead of having 100 vills throwing everything to the stockpile, you gotta put that onto the field by adding in more production buildings. When I was a kid, I thought all I needed was 1 TC to make villagers, obviously, 1 stable to make knights, obviously, 1 range to make archer units, obviously. I didn't need more. What's the point of having a 2nd stable? My 1st stable is already making all the cav units. But as it turns out, as I grew older, I realized, hey, double the stables is double the production. Double the production is double the elo. And that is as simple as it gets. That's going to do it for this video. If you guys did enjoy this one, I will make a follow-up with another 5 tips and tricks. And to be honest, I've got like 100 of these, so I can make infinite videos of these. So all you got to do is like the video and comment that you want to see more, and I'll definitely make more. Also, check out my Patreon if you guys want exclusive guides and content, long format, all the secrets, yada, yada, yada. And also check out my Twitch if you want to see my live streams and watch me play Pro 1v1 ranked every single day of my life. Links to both in the description below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.